Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Shed Adventures. Now, it's all getting a bit gruesome. Last week we had, it was a long, sorry, I went over my time limit, I think, a long conversation about the British Army officer and when he stopped playing with his sword. When did swords, were they ordered, it was actually a general order, as we now know, put your swords away, backload your swords, you're no longer using them. And we know 1914, around November, general order went out. We know why. They were losing large numbers of young officers to Germans, general shots, and of course snipers, because they're waving their sword around and they could be seen. So they would then just have their Webley. Don't get me wrong, fabulous .455, fabulous weapon, an absolute. You hit someone with a round from a Webley, they don't get up, but they've only got 6 shots. And it's got to be from relatively close range, and once you've used your 6 shots, you've got to find somewhere relatively quiet and secure to break your gun, eject the 6 rounds, laboriously put 6 more in. So they felt vulnerable. In addition, the British Army at the time had this concept of taking the fight to the enemy. They still use that term. Of aggressive patrolling, they still use that term. And they were sending people out to dominate no man's land at night in the main, and they were sending people out on trench raids almost every night. Some poor souls, Section 8 guys, led by an officer, would be going out to raid a trench to put disquiet into the Germans and bring back prisoners for questioning. Sometimes they were noisy raids, i.e. lots of shooting. A lot of the times they were quiet, and you needed tools, weapons that were not your rifle. And of course, the British officer, when he was in full fighting mode, when he jumped into a trench, he really wanted something, when it got hand to hand and got nasty, that he could use. Now, the obvious thing is a bayonet. But a bayonet to use as a knife is a compromise. Why? Well, if you look at a Lee Enfield bayonet, it's quite long. It's sort of a mini sword, 18 inches long. And if you look at the handle, here's a bayonet. This is actually a modern bayonet. It's off an AK-47. Its first design, what is the most important thing about this, is it fits on the AK-47, goes on easy, comes off easy, stays on though, and is a stabbing weapon. It's one of that motion. So actually, out the stores, this is brand new, never used, it's blunt. Right? It's just got a massive, really sharp point on the end. It's a stabbing weapon. You could sharpen it. But the handle is not great. It's first purpose, might look at, it's not a knife. It's not designed as its second purpose actually, is a set of wire cutters. So bayonets have their place, and they were used, don't get me wrong, because they're there, and you could pick it up lying everywhere, sadly, with 27,000 young men killed on the first day of the Battle of Somme. There's a few bayonets lying around, but they weren't necessarily ideal. So tools developed, people used what was around. So what was around? Well, here's a couple of interesting knives. Why are these available? Well, this is Second World War. It's Second World War chef's knife. Army chef's knife. Lovely Bakelite handle. Well put together with brass rivets. Here's a bigger one. Look at this beauty. Again, Second World War chef's knife. All you had to do is go back to the cookhouse, chat up a chef, nick one of these. Again, Bakelite, well put together. They have this beautiful sort of hilt bit here. So when you get a grip of that, your hand cannot slip forward. Obviously, they carry a wonderful. This is still used. This still does the Sunday roast. It's razor sharp. It is razor sharp. Such great quality steel, and it carries a wonderful edge. They would sharpen the other edge to make it more of a dagger. Here's a smaller one. I mean, absolutely ideal. If you're in a hand-to-hand situation, you've got this weapon, sharpen it on both sides. You've got a stabbing, slashing, cutting, poking, whatever you want weapon. So they would go and see the chef. They would go home on leave. The young the young gentleman would go and see Cook, and come back from leave armed to the teeth with weapons. He'd also go and see the local blacksmith and go, "What can you knock me up, Fred?" Or he would just sit in the trench and make something. So I haven't sat in the trench. I've sat in my workshop next door and I've made something. And I've made an improvised infantry fighting tool. Actually, I was making this, you can see I was halfway through making a replacement shaft for my axe, my hand axe, but I've turned it into an absolutely gruesome, close hand-to-hand combat. Your life depends on it. I mean, it was horrible to make, to be honest. If I went outside and I slammed this into a concrete block, I haven't even sharpened. What is this? So this is just a Bakshi gear. Actually, it's the gear off a skidoo. We had a skidoo on an expedition in the Antarctic, and the reverse gear seized onto the lay shaft. So a very good, skillful mechanic in a tent in the Antarctic winter heated the lay shaft. I took the skidoo apart and the gearbox apart, heated the lay shaft up on a primer stove, which you've seen, and got this off. But this is the sort of thing you could pick up anywhere. Whatever. It's just a big chunk of metal on a handle. This actually is yew. Ash would have been even better, but you know, it's part of my old longbow that broke. And you've got an absolute killer. I mean, this is a skull crusher. It's horrible. I'm going to take it apart when I finish. I really don't want this even in the shed. It is just evil. But this is what would save your life when your Webleys run out, or your 303s run out, or you know, rifles with a bayonet fitted along. When you're in there and it's hand to hand and it gets nasty, this is an absolute beast. Horrible, 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 horrible. But that's what trench fighting was like. So I said I'd make one. We're going to change the subject after this. So there we are. Improvised trench fighting tool, about as nasty as it gets. Now, some people actually had other things. So we have what I would call like national or dress weapons. So if you were a Scottish regiment, you would have your kilt, and in your kilt or in your sock, you'd have your dirk. I think that's the right pronunciation. Basically, a knife. You'll still see someone with his kilt that is sporran stuck in his. You'll see a little knife sticking out. So they had their dirk. Of course, the best weapon, in my view, you know, I think this is a design icon. This is just perfection in what it was designed to do. The Gurkha regiments fought in the First World War, Second World War. The honour awards they got is a list. I looked them up. Certainly 3 VCs, and this is probably the perfect. And I've shown you this before. The perfect close range trench infantry fighting weapon there is. I cannot tell you how well designed that is. As initially a hunting weapon, something that would take the head off a goat or something, but sadly something that in the hands of a skilled Gurkha, actually unskilled, this is the beauty of it, it's just perfect. It's horrible. There's no skill in this. This is just the perfect hacking weapon. It's not a stabbing weapon like all the others. It's a, if you got the first hit in, you were taking arms off, hands off, heads off. Yeah, it's unbelievable. So there were lots of things going on. Improvised, or in fact issued. That's an army issue Gurkha, actually Gurkha Transport Regiment. Now the other thing, and I'm surmising, so I'm going to do some research on this because I'm now interested in Irish regiments. What would an Irish regiment fighting in the war use, or any Irishman would use? They would use a shillelagh. That's interesting. I'm going to do some research on shillelaghs, because my interest has been fired by them. Developed or came from the country town of Shellys. But we'll talk about them. If you've ever seen, I don't know, Gangs of New York, that film, the Irish immigrants there, they'd be using shillelaghs. Colin Farrell's latest film, he's probably going to win an Oscar for. There'll be shillelaghs in there. We'll talk about those, and they're the whole social thing about shillelaghs and the relationship with the British government, and the fact the Irish were not allowed to carry weapons, but they look very much like a walking stick. But they're again vicious weapon. So we might talk about those. So hopefully I've kept this one, having troubled you for a long time on the last episode. This is a bit shorter. So an officer going over the top would not look like he looked in the movies. He would look mean, because he's got to live, he's got to survive, he's got to get to the trench. The weapons he's got is not an attacking weapon, as we discussed, and when he's in that trench, he's got to come out, and it's going to get messy. So go and get yourself a knife from the cookhouse. Go and get something. I mean, this took 45 minutes to knock up. You could just sit in your trench. You're going out on a night patrol or a trench raid. You haven't got anything, and I put a little hole in there where we could put a leather thong on so you couldn't drop it, or maybe you didn't want that. Maybe it would catch on barbed wire, whatever. Just stuff that into your Sam Brown, and if you needed it, it's there. If it gets messy, you can pull that out and absolutely crush anyone. And if you I don't want to sharpen these. I was thinking of putting the angle grinder on them, but it's just vicious. If you sharpen these, I dread to think the sort of injury you could cause if you smash that into someone's head. It's quite scary stuff. There we go. The last gruesome edition. So I hope you haven't found these last two episodes disturbing, but that's truth. That's history. And sadly, as we speak today, there'll be young men in the trenches in Ukraine, no doubt, doing something very similar. So it's grim stuff, but no point hiding from it. Hopefully it'll make us all think before we go to war. I hope you enjoyed this very quick episode. Found it interesting. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'm off to watch the Bahrain Grand Prix this afternoon. Not obviously live on television. Great stuff. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye for now.